Mayor Ken Livingstone, thank you very much for joining us on Jusur. Let me start by asking you, why is it that this mayoral election in particular is so significant?
I think there are two reasons. One, I was a clear opponent of the war in Iraq and have a long history of support for the Palestinian cause. The Conservative candidate was a completely committed supporter and talked about the American invasion in, quite horrendous ways, describing these godlike American giants and the small brown people with bad teeth and so on. And has a strong record of support for Israel, and I don't ever recall him having any sort of reasoned position on the plight of the Palestinians. So there's a clear choice here that reflects global politics. But also there's a very strong difference in the sort of city we wish to create. I've always talked about the right of people to live their life as they choose, so that a woman can choose to wear her hijab or not wear the hijab, a Jew can wear their traditional clothing or not. As long as you don't interfere with anyone else, you should be able to live your life, practice your religion, your culture. And that's what I understand by multiculturalism. Whereas Boris Johnson talks all the time about political correctness, which is a code really for a sort of Little Englander mentality. Yes. That, you know, if you want to live here, you've got to become English. You've got to leave your culture behind. And that, I think, would be very bad. I think London's success, why so many people wish to come here, is there is that freedom to be yourself as long as you don't interfere with others.
So, over the past 8 years since you've come to office, do you think that London has succeeded in facing the challenges of the last decade?
Oh, I do. Over the last 8 years, the number of racial and religious incidents has been cut in half. Last year, those incidents went down 14% in London, whilst they're going up 12% in the rest of Britain. And a mayor who makes the case for religious diversity and tolerance and cultural diversity is really key. Which I don't think we would have won the Olympic Games if we'd been running on the basis we're all English and all that. We said this is an international city. And I know we picked up many votes from Arab nations who have representatives on the International Olympic Committee because of the clear stance we take, whereas our main rivals, Paris, were of course going through that horrendous situation of banning the hijab and banning religious symbols, and I think there was a clear contrast.
Well, what would be the main challenges that face London and Londoners?
Well, I think that the most important challenge is that clearly our competitors grow ever stronger and work harder. The emerging cities like Mumbai and Shanghai and Hong Kong, people in the West, whether it's New York or London and Paris, have no idea of the scale of the challenge that's coming. We've been able to insulate the West because we control the international financial institutions, the Monetary Fund, the World Bank. All the forms of trade are rigged in our favour. Most of the oil companies, their profits come back much more to the West than perhaps should be fair. Now that world is passing. The emergence of China and India means all of us will start to compete on a more honest and equal basis. And I think when you look at how hard many children in the developing nations are working and studying. When I was in China, one of my staff walking through the markets found street traders who speak 5 languages. Here, almost no one in Britain speaks a second language.
You've talked about your own anti-war stand, your pro-Palestine stand, and this is, extremely significant for the Arab audiences, the Muslims in London, who constitute between 9 and 11% of Londoners. But really, how much does that matter for London? Why is it important for London to have a mayor that has that kind of international vision?
If you think back to the terrorist attacks in London on the 7th of July 2005, when 52 Londoners were killed in those bombings, clearly the goal of those bombers, divide Londoners and turn them against one another, and it just didn't happen. Not one single Londoner physically attacked another. There was a great coming together. Because I think what we're demonstrating to the world, you've got all those people around the White House and Huffington arguing there's a clash of civilizations, almost wanting a new Cold War between Islam and the West because they can sell their weapons and they can actually have this great military-industrial complex. And here you've got a city where it came through a terrible period, strengthened and united. And I think you can point to London and say there is no clash of civilizations. What we need is a world in which different nations and different faiths live side by side in mutual respect and tolerance. You don't want to clash the civilization. My entire first 50 years of my life after World War II, the whole of politics was dominated by the Cold War. Money went into armaments on a scale which could have relieved all the poverty in the world. We could be living in an almost perfect world had it not been these vast sums that Russia and America and Europe all threw into armaments.
So, I mean, you talk about the 7/7 bombings. Those happened during your time in office, amongst the darkest days that London has been through. Yet you sort of mentioned those as though many positives came out
It's
of
a
it.
strength. I mean, in so many other countries in the world, there would have been communal rioting, violence, and London's just weren't going to be divided. And that's because over this last 50 years, waves and waves of immigrants from all over the world have come here, have created wealth, created new jobs, contributed to running our society. And I think an awful lot of London just recognised the person they work for was born abroad. I mean, the tourists that they serve, they come from abroad.
Yes.
If we are welcoming to the foreigner, to the stranger, we take them into our midst, we're strengthened by that. We're able to choose what we like from each culture. If you look at whether it's a young person in China or India or Cairo or London, they have their mobile phone, they have their access to the internet.
Yes.
They are choosing what they want from each culture. This idea that the American culture would one day dominate the whole world through Hollywood and trade, I think now is clearly not going to happen. But neither is China or India or anyone else. I mean, the individuals must be free to choose what they like. I think an awful lot of people in the West will find much in terms of respect for family and the wider community that is inherent in much of Confucianism in China or the Quran in the Muslim world, that they are quite attracted to.
Your policies either at home in terms of the anti-terror legislations, abroad in terms of the war on Iraq, Afghanistan, the war on terror generally, Palestine, it all goes against the policies of your own party, the government. How does that sit with you and with your party?
It goes against the policies of the government, not the party.
Yes.
I mean, the party is an institution over 100 years old. It belongs to ordinary people who make that commitment. And when I was invited to come back and be the Labour candidate 4 years ago,
yes, because your first term you stood as an independent. Yes.
They made everything possible. They really didn't want a voice like mine representing London. Then they recognised there's not much they could do about it. They invited me back, and it was on a clear understanding. I am answerable on policy issues only to Londoners, not the government. Therefore, I don't agree with the government about the question of another runway at Heathrow Airport. And I certainly don't agree with the government about extending detention.
Yes.
Because it seems to me, around the world you have this line from Bush that the Muslim world hates us because of our democracy, our civil liberties, our freedoms. No, they don't actually. What many Muslims hate is that Western governments prop up regimes all over the Muslim world which deny democracy and human rights to their own peoples. They corrupt, feudal and military regimes. It's not they hate our values, they hate our hypocrisy and our double standards. As long as we can extract the oil from these nations, we're quite prepared to see barbaric regimes.